Yo, what's going on, guys? You got Glop, and your eyes deceive you not. Content in the great 2025. So, had a bit of a hiatus here. Haven't really felt like uploading anything in terms of content creation, but feeling an itch for it, and I figured what better way to come back onto the scene than to bring you guys the two things that my channel is known for, that being Draft League and Pokemon Clover. So, a little while back here, I actually started up in a draft league called the Me Draft League. Played in it last season, made it to semifinals, did all right for myself. And this time around, they're doing a Clover-only decks draft, and I figured why not make some content with this. So if you guys want to see a video describing the thought process for my draft that I came up with, the one on the left here, I can do that. Let me know in the comments. But otherwise, I just want to focus on the matches here moving forward and breaking down all of that. So if you guys are not interested in the team builder aspect and just want to jump right to the battle, you'll see a timestamp down in the description to jump right to that. Also, if you guys want to join this server and just spectate some of the games, talk with some of the captains, learn a little bit about what goes on in there, I'm going to go ahead and link the Discord in the description as well. So week one, we're playing against a captain named Ban Venawat. Now, didn't know much about this guy prior to our battle, but once the battle actually started, noticed that he had a handful of trophies underneath his server name, so clearly the guy, plays on the Clover server, plays in different tournaments and events and things like that, so definitely somebody that knows what they're doing. When looking at his draft, though, it's a little bit unorthodox. It's kind of like this semi-stall structure with some fast, flexible pieces like the Tuna King and Smoxilin. So the main thing we need to watch out for is basically making sure that our damage sticks. We want to make good use of moves like Taunt and Knock Off. We want to remove leftovers. We want to deny healing options so that our damage sticks and we can find a way to clean up and bag up the team. So I'm going to switch over here into the team builder and break down my thought process on each mon. And on screen on the right here, I'm going to pull up that same matchup so you guys can see what I'm talking about as we're going through the different Pokemon. So first member on the team here is our Ree again, and decided to go with a really bulky Assault Vest set. Looking at his squad, really it's difficult for him to KO or remove with any of his Pokemon. The only thing that really threatens lethal damage is maybe like a close combat or a body press from Ubra. Otherwise, everything else kind of just choose, right? I mean, Octai can go for water moves, but early game, if he doesn't know whether or not I'm dry skin on this, right, he might want to be cautious about that. But also, most special hits, we're just going to chew anyways. So the main reason this Pokemon is here is two things. Number one, knock off and position our threats, right? So we want to get rid of items like leftovers, Rocky Helmet, a Violite, anything that's going to be stalling us out more or less. And U-turn is a really safe tool to just get out in front of whatever is on the field and position one of our breakers to come in and start doing some damage. The second reason here is really I want to make sure I have good insurance versus the Tuna King. We do have some pretty decent fire switch-ins, but if it goes for a Calm Mind, it could easily break through Dreambeam, it could break through Substar, it's got coverage for those Pokemon as well. So really wanted to make sure I had my bases covered versus that thing, so that's why I went with Max Spidef on this. Pretty straightforward set, Rapid Spin, just, there to get rid of some hazards if we get the chance. Chancer isn't really a great spin block versus this Pokemon, since Knockoff is going to threaten great damage on it, and it's also going to remove that Eviolite, which is going to be very detrimental for it in the long term. So I figured this thing would be quite effective into his build. It's basically unkillable. So next Pokemon we got here is the Barkley, and if you look at his roster, his rock resists are not great. It's one Pokemon, that being the Ubra. So I wanted to make sure I'd be able to break through that thing, worst case scenario. So I was actually running some calcs and saw that +2 acrobatics with the Flying Gem is an OHKO on max defense. I think it's about 75% of the time. So if we have any little bit of chip on that Pokemon before it comes in, if we're able to get off that Swords Dance, I mean, we're in the money. This thing looks like it can just sweep his whole team, right? So EVs on this here, we're speed creeping max speed a Bullable, which hits 317, and I didn't really feel a need to creep any of the other Pokemon, mostly like the Sawdodge, because if you look at the Pokemon that are faster than a Bullable at that 95 stat, everything above it is weak to Accel Rock. So we already have a priority move that can keep those Pokemon in check, so no real need to have additional speed. Lets us run an Adamant Nature, which is really crucial for that damage roll I described onto the Ubra with acrobatics. And then of course Chaos Dunk is our great stab move to just spam and do a lot of damage onto his team. Pretty easy to find Swords Dance opportunities with this Pokemon as well, right? Magic Bounce is going to shut down a lot of like utility move attempts like Status, Toxic, Spore, things like that. And kind of bulky. I mean, 96 with these defenses isn't really the worst. A lot of his Pokemon are kind of passive and just aren't threatening a lot of damage, so we should be able to find an opportunity to go for a Sword Stance and start applying some huge pressure on his team. Next Pokemon we got here is the Spookzilla, and we are speed creeping Modest Sawdodge. Everything beyond that, didn't really care about. We've got Spook Out and Shadow Bone. Pretty standard in this Pokemon, right? Spook Out is a great way to keep things in check, like the Smoxillion if it goes for a Shell Smash. Also hits Tuniking super effectively, hits it with priority, which is quite nice. And Shadow Bone is just really consistent damage into his team. He doesn't have a normal type, so the only Pokemon that resists it is Ebolable, which doesn't really appreciate getting taunted. That's going to deny it from recovering if it's like a bulkier set. And if it's offensive, we obviously have the Regen, which just walls it forever, so not going to be an issue. Last two moves I elected to go with were Will-O-Wisp and Taunt. The reason being is I felt like Ubra would be a pretty consistent switch into this Pokemon, and if I could get a Will-O-Wisp onto that thing, that's going to really open up for Barkley later on in the game, and we can taunt it to prevent it from going for recovery with Shore Up. So felt like that would be a really strong strategy to have with this Pokemon. Taunt also, of course, very strong into other members of his team, like the Chancer, Octai, Picotin, right? Any of these Pokemon we can just taunt and deny any kind of recovery, or like Heal Bell, something like that, making sure that our status sticks and that our damage sticks while maintaining offensive pressure. Next Pokemon we got here is the Substar, and this is a little bit of an interesting pick here. I just wanted something that would give me some insurance versus Sawdodge, but also be able to maintain pressure and provide some utility for the team, and it's kind of a nice blend with this Pokemon here. So Surf is only resisted by two different water types he's got, Octai and Hosajag, both of which are going to be weak to Volt Switch. So all around this thing is threatening pretty meaningful damage onto his roster. Water Bubble, of course, prevents us from getting burned from stray Will-O-Wisps, but it also is very beneficial for powering up that Surf, making it hit a lot harder onto targets like Avian Join or onto the Ubra, so that we can threaten a KO in that Pokemon and open up for the Barkley. Heal Bell is really nice. His team is going to be focused heavily on trying to spread status onto ours, so we have a way to kind of just keep that in check, keep the rest of the team healthy, making sure that they're able to perform their duties and do what they got to do. And any of you who are quite bright with your numbers, you're going to recognize I got an unoptimal EV spread, and you're 100% right. Should have been bold, could have had more special attack on this thing. A little bit of a oversight on my end. On regular Showdown, they actually have a feature that'll optimize it for you, but on the Clover one, it does not correct that for you. It's something I noticed kind of in like post-op here, so moving forward, going to be paying more attention to that. Pretty straightforward Pokemon. Sugar Berry is just really nice to, like I said, give more insurance versus Sawdodge. If it goes for like a nasty plot Earth Power, we can tank that. Also gives us insurance versus Smoxillion if that thing wants to go for, Shell Smash Earthquake. We've got coverage versus that as well. The team is a little bit ground weak too, so I just wanted to have, extra insurance versus Ubra in case, I lost my Spookzilla and it started getting out of hand. Want to make sure I've got multiple ways to keep that Pokemon in check. Next member I've got here is the Ku Clan, and item-wise, I really couldn't find anything better than Charcoal. So I wanted to make sure that Blue Flare was going to be threatening lethal damage onto targets like the Ubra and the Ebolable, everything like that. And I have coverage for the resist too, right? So I've got Energy Ball for Octai, and I've got Earth Power for Hosajak. Taunt, of course, keeps Pokemon like Chancer low, prevents Octai from going for a recovery move if it elects to stay in. And Charcoal was just really nice, like I said, just for that initial burst damage. I didn't want to be Specs, because I felt like locking into Specs attacks with this Pokemon would not be ideal, especially if Stealth Rock is up. I don't want this thing coming in multiple times and being forced to make a prediction just to get value. I'd rather be able to just kind of spam my attacks, taunt when necessary, use coverage when necessary, and find value that way. So speed on this thing here, we are creeping max. We're creeping max speed Sawdodge in case he brings that thing. Otherwise, we're just pumped up into special attack, a little bit of leftovers for the HP. Pretty straightforward in this. Levitate's going to be our ability of choice, going to allow us to ignore spikes if those get set up. Also going to allow us to ignore Earthquake from Ubra, maybe find an entry point on that thing, threaten it with a Blue Flare, go from there. So, last member here, I wanted to have a way to clean up, right? So we've got a lot of good breakers, we've got good pivots, good utility, but we need a way to actually wrap up the game, and that's where Avicycle comes in, running a Shift Gear set, which is pretty par for the course with this Pokemon. A lot of times it likes to run this set, but Avicycle does have quite a very deep move pool. It can definitely run things like utility sets, pivot sets, things like that. It's got rapid spin, so a lot that it can offer. But in this case here, I really wanted to focus on the offensive prowess it could bring to the table. So we're using shift gear here with 256 speed at +2. That puts us at 512, which I believe gets the jump on Choice Scarf Tuna King. I'm pretty sure that was my thought process there. Everything else doesn't really matter. Any other Scarfer on his team would obviously be slower than us. And prior to shift gear, we take hits from everything very comfortably. We don't need to really outspeed anything else prior to getting off the shift gear. It's not really going to be an issue. So we've got Psychic Fangs, Flare Blitz, and Crunch. Now Psychic Fang is going to be our main go-to stab, especially with that strong jaw. Going to be making it really powerful when it's at +1. 90 attack is pretty underwhelming, but when you give it a boost from an ability and you give it a +1 from a status move like shift gear, damage definitely racks up pretty quickly. Crunch here is really nice to hit Tuna King, threaten an Oko on that after we've gone for the shift gear. And Flare Blitz is a great way to just put pressure on the Avian Join. Now this does leave us a little bit vulnerable to the Ebola Bowl if it does come. I did consider running Earthquake, but ended up deciding that Flare Blitz would probably be more valuable since I felt that Avian Join was a much more likely bring into the matchup. And I looked at some calcs too. I mean, +1 Flare Blitz does 75% like minimum to no bulk Ebola Bowl. So even if he does bring that thing, obviously we've got, you know, the Regan that can just come in forever, wall it, go for Earthquake, go for U-turn, position our attackers. So I wasn't too worried about that thing. I felt like if I could weaken that Pokemon and then find a position to shift gear, I should just be able to clean from there. Lumberry here is a pretty key item, especially in his team. Like I said, it's going to be trying to spread status onto us. So any stray Scald Burns that come our way, it's going to give us counterplay to that. Also, if Smoxilla wants to run Spore, you know, that might be an entry point where we can come in, set up in front of it, and then go for a clean. So that's going to be it for the team builder, guys. I will see you in the battle. All right, and we are back for the battle. So something I noticed off the rip here is that the opponent selected to bench both of his offensive fire types, that being the Tuna King and the Saw Dodge. Obviously, that's great news for our Regan. Going to make it be under a lot less pressure as a result, so that thing's going to feel a lot more unkillable as we go throughout the battle. The other Pokemon he's elected to bench was the Ebola Bowl, which means that our Avacycle has a field day on this team, provided we're able to get Chip on the right Pokemon and we're able to find a suitable position to set up. So when deciding on my lead here, I figured that I would go with Spookzilla just to cover a Smoxilla lead. Could potentially be something like a lead Focus Sash set with status or hazards if he maybe isn't aware of Magic Bounce on Barbarclay. So figured either way, breaking a Focus Sash off lead would be nice, and Spook Out is guaranteed damage and information on the set on any Pokemon, so that's exactly what I'm going to do here. Going to go ahead and lead off with it. In turn 1, don't want to predict anything, just going to go right for the Spook Out, as he's going to pull a switch into the Ubra, and based on that damage there, I'm able to tell that that is a physically defensive set, so I'm kind of expecting Stealth Rock to want to go up here, because Barbarclay is a really wild switch for me to make. You could just go for a ground move or like a knockoff, and so I think that would be pretty unwise of us to lose our item on that Pokemon immediately. So I like to go for Taunt here just to cover Stealth Rock, as unfortunately we get knocked off. Definitely going to hurt our longevity in the long term, but not going to be the end of the world. Right here I see this is a pretty free position to go for a Will-O-Wisp. Now, if he was wary of this, maybe he could pull a switch to Avian Join, but we are going to land, thankfully. And that's going to set up beautifully for our Barbarclay going forward into this battle. Now that this thing's taking a little bit of chip, can't recover, and it's burned, means that if we're able to find that Sora's Dance, Acrobatics is going to put in huge work. So right here, I'm going to pull a switch into Substar, kind of knowing that knockoff spam is coming out. And I like to go to this Pokemon here because if I'm able to make that Will-O-Wisp stick onto the Ubra, which I should be able to, thanks to Taunt on Kuclan and also on Spookzilla, I know that I'll be able to navigate around this thing, and like having my Shuka Berry isn't going to be the end of the world. Doesn't really matter if I lose it. There's no ground coverage from Saw Dodge, and this thing's already burned, so I figured this was the best Pokemon to lose its item. Also going to put me in a nice position here just to go for a Surf. Don't really feel like predicting anything, seeing as it's turn 5 of the battle, so just going to go for that Surf, get some information on his team. See that this is a mostly specially defensive Octai. Not fully, but mostly specially defensive. Going to allow me here to pivot into Regan. I figured that since it's a defensive set, it's not going to be offensively invested, meaning that this Pokemon won't take a lot of damage. Obviously, both of its stabs threaten super effective damage, but because I don't need to preserve health on this thing for any offensive fire type in the back, I can be a lot more liberal with my use of it. So early game, this can give me an opportunity to go for the knockoffs I was talking about, get rid of items, disrupt this team. as we're able to catch the Avian Joint upon switching, and this is a huge turn in my opinion. This thing losing Flame Orb is devastating for it. So for those who don't know, it's got the ability Flare Heal, which is basically like Gliscor's Toxic Heal, but just for burn. So if this Pokemon is able to activate that burn, it would be restoring 12% of its health each turn, which could be pretty annoying. So really fortunate for us there. Able to go for a U-turn in the following turn here. Going to pivot in and go into Kuclan. Just threatening a blue flare into this Pokemon. Want to scare it out. And again, no reason to predict. Still trying to get information on how my opponent wants to play it. We're going to find pretty good damage onto the Octai, and then I'm going to go ahead and go for an Energy Ball just to like scout and see what moves he has. As he pulls a nice switch into Smoxilon. And right here I'm thinking, okay, this is a very likely position for a Hazard to go up, or you're going to go for a Spore, or maybe U-turn. Barbarkley covers all three of those options pretty nicely, so I'm going to pull a switch into it. As he's going to make a double into Chancer, maybe expecting like a Psychic on my end or something to that effect. But this ends up working out really nicely for me because Chancer doesn't threaten Barbarkley at all. This is going to be a great opportunity to go for that Swords Dance. And at this point in the game, I'm thinking that I'm in a very commanding position, right? Like, I can just knock this thing out with a Chaos Dunk, and the rest of the team is ready to fold thanks to that early damage that I got into Abra. So I go for my Chaos Dunk here, and it does a meaty 49. And I kind of was staring at my screen for a minute like, bro, did I forget EVs? Is this thing hacked? And then I realized this Pokemon is Fluffy. And we go one step further, folks. Chaos Dunk is a contact move. And I had no idea that it was a contact move. So this really, really fucked me over because he ends up being max physical defense, which is like, what the hell? Didn't expect that. This thing runs Light Ball, so I kind of expected more of an offensive set. But luckily we're able to live the Thunderbolt because he's not offensively invested. And right here I figure, shit, well, I may as well get the most value out of this thing as I can. I'm not going to get another chance to go for a Swords Dance, so I just go for another Chaos Dunk as he pulls a switch into Abra. Reveals to be Rocky Helmet, which is a little bit annoying because it means that one more hit and I am going to go down. But at the very least here, I am able to make a trade, go for the Acrobatics, and knock this thing out in the following turn. So we're going to have a double down here. Maybe not the best trade, but I've got Chip on the Picotin, and I've gotten rid of the Flame Orb on Avian Join, so I'm feeling pretty good about my position here. And this is a great entry point now for our Spookzilla to come back in and just keep putting on pressure, denying things with Taunt. Just going to go right for a Shadow Bone here, or sorry, Spook Up, as he goes for a Protect. And don't want to lose this Pokemon quite yet. Figure that I can go into again, and I can pressure with Earthquake, seeing as how Fluffy doesn't ignore, or doesn't give you a defense boost versus Earthquake. So it would still do more damage, basically. So I'm just going to go out into it here, and I believe I just throw off an Earthquake. Just want to play it safe as he makes a switch in Avian Join, which is fine, because again, I always have a free U-turn here, and I can put Kuclan onto the field, start pressuring this Pokemon, so I'm going to do exactly that. And I believe I just throw off a Blue Flare in this following turn here. Didn't really feel like predicting again. Get the burn on it, thankfully, which does help quite a lot. And I felt like right here, pretty obvious you want to go for like a Teleport, some kind of status move. So I'm going to go reveal that I have Taunt now, as I'm able to deny a Heal Bell. And notably, Chancer does not have Natural Cure. As you saw, I just got Curse Body on a Blue Flare. So this burn is going to stick on it, which is just going to be great, putting additional pressure on it in the following turns. Gonna now switch into again here, seeing as I can threaten a knockoff on anything. Gonna go right for that now as he goes back into Avian Join. But again, I don't mind this sequence. This really benefits me in the long run, I feel. So just gonna go for that U-turn play. Bring out the Kuclan here. Just gonna throw off another Blue Flare as he goes back into Chancer. So it's now gonna be around 50% after the damage and the burn. And right here, I was pretty confident that he wasn't gonna click Shadow Ball, but also that maybe he would expect Taunt. So I expected one of two things. I expected either like a healing move, or I expected a switch out. And I felt like Spookzilla covered both pretty nicely, since even if he heals, I'm threatening super effective Shadow Bone, and I'm putting a lot of pressure onto his team, seeing as there's no Ghost Resist. So I make that switch here, and it actually works out really beautifully for me, because he goes for the Seismic Toss. So I really couldn't ask for a better position. I'm now able to go for a Shadow Bone as Octai comes in. This here reveals that it does have a little bit of defense investment, but it's not quite enough. As you can see, it does quite a lot of damage to it, and it's really in my favor to just keep spamming this because I'm able to fish for defense drops. So I'm just going to go for another one here. Don't want to go for a Taunt in case he goes for an aggressive Scald. And so he lands a Toxic here. Maybe I could have taunted, but again, I felt like I should just keep pressuring where he can't defend because there's no resist. So I felt like my best play was just to continue going for that Shadow Bone. He's going to pivot into Smoxilon here. Gets a dirty crit. A little bit unfortunate, but I don't think it changed a lot in the grand scheme of things. And at this point, I don't really need Spookzilla anymore. In fact, the way I'm seeing it, all I need to do is find a position for Avicycle to set up, and the game should be wraps. So I think, okay, if he knocks me out here, then I just get an Ava cycle and the game should be over, right? So I'm just going to stay in, go for another Shadow Bone as he's going to pivot back into Octai. And again, no reason to go for taunt or anything. Should just keep attacking where they can't defend. Going to throw off my last Shadow Bone here. And now we're setting up perfectly for this endgame with Ava cycle. So we've gotten rid of the ground type, which means that Volt Switch is a guaranteed hit onto any of his Pokemon. And it's going to knock out Pakatin at 8%. So I can go right out into Substar now. And this sets us up beautifully for our position to set up with the Ava cycle. So we're going to go for that Volt Switch. Going to bring out the Ava cycle now. We can go right for the Shift Gear, as I believe he goes for a Recover this turn. And now we're positioned pretty much just to sweep. So I'm going to go right for the Psychic Fangs as it does significant damage, is able to live it barely and go for a Haze. And I figure in the following turns here, let me try to catch a choke, right? Maybe he'll switch out and not spam Haze. So I go for Shift Gear again. I think I give it one more shot, and then I realize, all right, he acknowledges that not hazing is a lose con, more or less. So just going to go ahead and knock him out with Psychic Fangs right here. He's going to bring out the Smoxilon. And this is when I knew that the game was a Jover, because he goes for the Spore, but we're just too smart. We're too tough. We accounted for everything in the team builder, and that Lumberry is going to come in clutch, going to allow us to go for that Shift Gear, and it's going to be a wraps from there. We're able to go for the Psychic Fangs in the subsequent turn, knock out this Smoxilon. He's going to bring out Aviate Join in a last-ditch effort, but no, my friend, we have the Flare Blitz. We came prepared. Chancer's going to come out, and honestly, I just clicked Crunch for the fuck of it. Psychic Fangs would have killed, but Crunch seemed like more of an aura play, so, you know, why not go for that? And we're able to get a pretty dominant 4-0. So the early game really did not go how I anticipated. Obviously, the sequences with Chaos Dunk on Pakatin and the Rocky Helmet definitely kind of threw me for a loop, but I noticed that if we just kept focusing our attacks, keeping things low with taunt, that we should be able to eventually navigate a position to set up the Ava cycle, and our game plan worked out beautifully. So, hope you guys have enjoyed week 1 here of the Me Draft League. I will be working on the team builder and the battle for week 2 pretty soon here, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.